Dr. Chicano, you were paid to be here today, correct?
I'm Dr. Johnson.
Dr. Johnson, you were paid to be here today, correct?
Yes,
You were also paid during those 10 hours you were evaluating Mr. Draft, correct?
that is the standard procedure for.
And you were also paid when you administered the MMPI to Mr. Draft, correct?
Yes,
During the course of the MMPI, you arrived at some conclusions, correct?
yes,
Your opinion here today that Mr. John Draft possesses a mental disease or defect is based upon the fact your findings in the MMPI, correct?
that is one of the elements I considered.
And during the course of the MMPI, you conduct an evaluation of Mr. Draft's medical history, correct?
No, I don't believe his medical history was part of it.
So you didn't know that Mr. Draft was on medication the day you administered the MMPI?
No, I did not.
But you were in the court when Mr. Draft said he was on medication when he took the MMPI, correct?
Yes,
And you also heard Mr. Draft said he was feeling groggy that day.
I don't know Mr. Draft, so I don't know if that's his normal state or whether he was groggy.
You don't know Mr. Draft.
At the time, I did not know him.
But you did hear him today say that he was groggy during the administration of the MMPI, correct?
I heard him say that.
And that he guessed on some of the answers.
I heard him say he answered to the best of his ability.
But you also heard him say he guessed on some of the answers, correct?
Yes.
And that guessing on some of the answers by a subject would affect the validity of the MMPI, correct?
If by guessing you mean he didn't use any educated method for guessing. He did it to the best of his ability.
If you were aware of a subject guessing on an MMPI inventory, that would raise some question of its validity, correct?
Well, there's three markers that indicate whether the test is valid or not. So anything like that would come up in the validity portion of the test.
And if one of those validity scales or testimony from a subject lets you know that he was guessing, it would raise question about the validity of the test, correct?
It would come out in those three markers.
But Dr. Johnson, would it or would it not raise question about the validity of the test?
Yes.
During the course of this test, you were also made aware of, excuse me, in addition to validity issues coming from the subject, validity issues can come from how the test is scored, correct?
Yes.
Those issues usually arise when the test is scored by hand, correct?
Yes.
You scored this test by hand, right, Dr. Johnson?
Yes, and I am an expert in scoring these tests. I've been called many times to score a test that another practitioner has scored. So I am considered an expert in scoring the test. Therefore, I think my test results are valid because of my methodology in scoring.
You scored this test by hand, correct, Dr.
Yes.
Johnson?
Objection asked and answered.
Your Honor, the question was not answered. The question was answered in the midst of a long narrative about her expertise, but my question was not answered.
Your Honor, opposing counsel conceded that the question was answered.
Doctor, did you score this by hand?
Yes, I did.
You also look at the L scale. That's one of the validity scales, correct?
Yes, it is.
That scale measures the subject's adherence to a strict set of moralistic codes, correct?
Yes, it does.
And the moralistic code is the ability to determine right from wrong, correct?
Yes.
The higher that L scale is, the more rigidly a subject was adhering to that code of determining right from wrong at the time of the test, correct?
Yes.
This score is at 74, correct?
Yes.
Based upon your knowledge, education, experience, the red flag is raised at 70, correct?
No.
When is the red flag raised?
On the L scale,
Yes.
60.
60, so less than 70.
Yes.
This is 14 points higher than 60, correct?
Yes.
But it raised no alarm about the validity of this test to you?
No, that is not one that raises alarm on validity. It's just somebody's personal code of ethics. Right?
During the course of your 10 hours of evaluations, you had the occasion to speak to Mr. Draft, correct?
Yes, I did.
And during the course of that conversation, you found that Mr. Draft owned a weapon. You found out he owned a firearm,
Yes,
a .32 caliber firearm first.
yes,
And you found out that he possessed that weapon on May 14, 2011, correct?
yes,
You also concluded that he used that weapon on May 14, 2011, didn't you?
no,
During the course of your conversation with Mr. Draft, you were told that Mr. Draft he recalls returning from Mr. Walker's apartment, correct?
no,
During the course of that conversation, you were also told that Mr. Draft cleaned his firearm on May 14, 2011, weren't you?
hold on a second. I don't know.
You don't know. You stated earlier that you were of the opinion that Mr. Draft possessed a mental disease or defect, correct?
Yes,
And that mental disease or defect was present on May 14, 2011.
yes,
And you made that conclusion partly because of the MMPI, correct?
that was part of the basis.
What does this MMPI doesn't tell you anything about a mental disease or defect on 12/14/2011, correct?
It tells me that he has a predisposition to behave in a certain way, and the events of that day triggered this predisposition.
You would agree that MMPI results change from time to time, correct?
Yes,
So an MMPI test done today would not be the same as one done tomorrow.
the general outcome of the MMPI is the same regardless of the day. The specific scores may change from day to day.
You only conducted one MMPI in this particular case, correct?
Correct.
This MMPI measures Mr. John Draft's personality indicators on the date the MMPI was administered, correct?
Those specific numbers were for the day that he was tested, but the
These spec-
general shape of the scores with, plus or minus a few points, that's the general, I don't know what you're saying, psychiatric profile.
These specific numbers don't tell you anything about Mr. Draft's personality on May 14, 2011, do they?
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled.
Those specific ones were for the specific date that the test was administered, but the general profile is valid for Mr. Draft on any date,
My question is,
including the date of the incident.
these numbers don't represent Mr. John Draft's personality profile on May 14, 2011, do they, Dr. Johnson?
The exact numbers, no, but the profile, yes.
They don't tell you anything about Mr. Draft's ability to conform to law on May 14, 2011, do they?
The shape of the 6, 7, 8 does tell me what his mental state is in a general way.
But it does not tell you on May 14, 2011 specifically.
It tells me that he's predisposed towards some actions, and so, yes, it does say that on a certain date, he would be predisposed to some actions.
Does that date appear on this?
No,
Dr. Johnson, you remember giving earlier testimony in the hearing in this trial, correct?
me giving earlier testimony?
Yes, earlier. And you were asked the question, what else did you learn in the case that supports an insanity defense, correct?
Yes,
And you responded, well, I'm aware that Draft apparently returned home after shooting Walker, and that
Objection,
apparently,
Your Honor. This is hearsay.
Abstain. This is a prior
this is the witness's prior testimony, Your Honor,
under cross.
under cross.
In that case, Your Honor, I ask you the opportunity to see the
Sure.
document being used.
Your Honor, I could point him to it, but I'm not aware of any rule that requires me to point out where exactly in the record this comes from. It is on page 5 of her deposition, lines 13 through 20.
Let's see the document that
We
opposing counsel is
currently
reading
show-
onto the record.
Hmm?
Let's see the document that opposing counsel is reading onto the record.
What's the question?
Whether or not, in order for this to be a proper impeachment, I ask that I be able to see the document
Sure.
that opposing counsel is reading onto the record.
Do you have a copy?